everyone, it's Nicole. Today I'm bringing you my April wrap-up. I don't know why it's so hard for me to film and upload wrap-ups in a timely manner, because here we are, a week left in May, and I'm just now bringing you an April wrap-up. I have no excuses, only that I have no idea where this entire month went. I have a lot of books to talk about, so I'm just going to jump right in and get started. The first book that I read in the month of April was Keep Me Safe by Maya Banks. This is the first book in the Slow Burn series. I really enjoy Maya Banks. She writes a lot of contemporary and historical romances, but this is her take on some paranormal aspects. The main character in this book, she has a psychic ability. She is able to touch an object belonging to someone and figure out where they are, even kind of go into their minds and speak through them. She uses her psychic ability to help find missing people. I really enjoyed this first book. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read in the month of April was The Immortal Who Loved Me by Lindsay Sands. This is book number 21 in the Argan Series. I like this series just because it is a different take on vampires. The vampires in this story were actually scientists from Atlantis that developed and created what they call nanites, which they injected into a living host. And these nanites keep the host at peak condition. They do this by using a very high amount of blood. More blood than the body can produce, so that's why they have to get outside blood. In Atlantis, they had blood transfusions, so it wasn't that big of a deal. But when Atlantis fell and they had to join the less technologically advanced society, the nanites kind of morphed their body and adapted their bodies to help them get the blood that they need. Night vision, fangs, the whole shebang. This is a very well-established series. Like I said, this is book number 21. It's still going strong. It's kind of hard for an author to have a series run this long and still have it fresh and new. I ended up giving this book 3 out of 5 stars. The next book I read in the month of April was Dreaming in the Shadows by Ross Caligari. This is a book that I read with my In Real Life book club. The main character in this book can actually change the timeline by accessing people's memories. I did like the premise of this story. It is a debut novel from this author. I ended up giving it 3 out of 5 stars. The next book I read in the month of April was Snowflower and the Secret Fan by Lisa C. I buddy read this book with Jessica and Christina over at Game of Tomes. I really enjoyed this book. This is my first Lisa C book, but it will not be my last. I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars. Next books I read in the month of April was books 22 and 23 of the Argan Series, About a Vampire and Runaway Vampire by Lindsay Sands. Same series I talked about a little bit ago. I ended up giving About a Vampire 3 out of 5 stars and Runaway Vampire 4 out of 5 stars. Next book I have here is Obsidium by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. I don't really need to say anything about this book. Everyone who has read it knows it's good, and everyone who hasn't read it has heard great things about it. Great book, great ending to this series. I love this series. 5 out of 5 stars. Next book I read was A Kiss at Midnight by Eloisa James. This is a historical romance. This series is her fairy tale series. She's retelling fairy tales, and this is her take on the Cinderella story. I ended up giving it 3 out of 5 stars. Next book I read is His Big Mountain Axe by Madison Faye. This was a series that I started back in March and February. This is the 4th book in the Blackthorn Mountain Men series. I don't know if this is the final book, but of all the men that live on this mountain, this is the final character that we have to talk about, so I think it might be the end. I did like this book. I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars. The next books I read were books 1 and 2 in the Dirty Bad Things series by Madison Faye. First book is Hardcore. Second book is Pretty Dirty. I picked up these books because I really enjoyed Madison Faye's Blackthorn Mountain Men series. I was kind of underwhelmed with this series. I ended up giving Hardcore 3 out of 5 stars and Pretty Dirty 2 out of 5 stars. Next book I read is His Dream Baby by B.B. Hamill. It's one of those secret baby romance. I really did enjoy this one. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Next book I read is Dirty Deeds by Laura Landish. I guess last month I was on this really big romance kick and I binge read a bunch of romance novels. I really liked this one. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Next book I read is His Perfect Baby by B.B. Hamill. I picked this one up because I really liked the first one, but this one kind of left me a little bit underwhelmed. I ended up giving it 3 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was A Natural History of Dragons, a memoir by Lady Trent by Marie Brennan. I did really like this book. It's a fantasy book written as a memoir. about Lady Trent and her adventures in discovering dragons. I listened to the audiobook of this one and I really, really enjoyed it. It was really good. 4 out of 5 stars. Next book I read was Dragonfly and Amber by Diana Gabaldon. I buddy read this with my co-hostess, with the co-mostess Jen. We are trying to get through the entire Outlander series this year. So this was book 2. Kind of underwhelmed with this book. It's my least favorite so far. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. The next books I read was books 24 and 25 in the Argan Series, Immortal Knights and Immortal Unchained. Trying really hard to finish this series, I ended up giving these both 4 out of 5 stars. Next book I read was The Thief by J.R. Ward. This is book number 16 in the Black Dagger Brotherhood. If you haven't read this series, I highly recommend it. It is a paranormal romance about vampires. I ended up giving this book 4 out of 5 stars. Next book I read was Assault and Pepper by Leslie Buttywitz. I hope that's how you pronounce it. This was the book of the month for the Cozy Mystery Book Club, and I ended up giving it 3 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I listened to the audiobook of this, and I really, really enjoyed the narrators. There are 3 different women who narrate this book, and they did a phenomenal job. And I really did enjoy this book. I kind of struggled with my rating at the end because there were some things that the main character did that I wasn't too happy about and didn't really agree with, but I ended up giving this 4 out of 5 stars. Next book I read in the month of April was When Beauty Tamed the Beast by Eloisa James. This is book 2 in her fairy tale series. This is about the Beauty and the Beast retelling, and even though that first book I didn't really enjoy it too much, I love this book. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Next book I read was Wonder Woman Warbringer by Leigh Bardugo. Was kind of underwhelmed with the way this book went, and I ended up giving it 3 out of 5 stars. Next book I read in the month of April was Gates of Golorath by R.M. Guarino. I have a full review about this book, and I will link it in the description box below. I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars. Next book I read was White Hot by Sandra Brown. I am buddy reading a bunch of Sandra Brown books with my co-hostess, with the co-mostess Jen, and Kelsey over at Hardback Haven. I am loving rereading these books. Sandra Brown is one of my favorite authors. I ended up giving this book 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was The Air He Breathes by Brittany C. Cherry. This was the book pick of the month for my Romantics at Heart book club. It wasn't as good as the first 2 books that we picked. There was some pretty problematic aspects to the relationship of this book, but I still really enjoyed it. I ended up giving it 3 out of 5 stars. And the last book that I read was Brighter Than the Sun by Maya Banks. This is book number 11 in the KGI series. It's a contemporary romance. I ended up giving this book 4 out of 5 stars. So that is it. Those are all the books that I read in the month of April. Gonna do a little count for you. Final total, I read 27 books in the month of April. I did really good. I'm really proud of myself. Pat on the back. If you've read any of these books, if you've read any good books lately and you want me to know about it, I love recommendations. Please comment below. Don't forget to like my video if you did. Give me a big thumbs up. You can follow me on all the social media platforms. The links will be in the description box below. I'll see you next time, avid readers.